The first time my 6-year-old son told me he wished he were normal, something inside me cracked open and never healed. He didn't say it because of a bad day. He said it because my ex-brother-in-law, Rick, told him that normal boys don't cry at fireworks. That moment buried itself deep inside me, not just because it hurt, but because it confirmed the truth I'd been trying to deny. The people closest to us saw my son as defective. My son, Ethan, wasn't broken. He was brilliant, high-functioning autistic with a mind like a clockwork universe. At age 4, he could explain the difference between a comet and an asteroid. He color-coded his bookshelves and labeled every drawer in our kitchen. But none of that mattered to them. Not to my ex-wife, not to her family. To them, Ethan wasn't a child. He was a problem. Lena, my ex-wife, walked out when Ethan was 5. She'd made it clear she blamed him for her unraveling. On her way out, she said, "I can't be a mother to a kid like this. He's not right." Those were her parting words. And just like that, she vanished. After Lena left, her family began hovering like crows circling roadkill. It started with concerned check-ins, awkwardly disguised as parenting advice. Then came the uninvited visits. And then came Rick. Rick once forgot Ethan at a gas station outside Kansas City and didn't notice until over an hour later. He called it a wake-up call. A week later, he lured Ethan into his pickup with the promise of ice cream, drove him 45 minutes away to a park in a different county, left him there, and then called Child Protective Services on me for abandonment. That CPS visit didn't go anywhere, but it planted a seed in Lena's parents' heads. If Rick could get authorities involved once, why not again? They filed for emergency custody within a month. But here's the kicker. They didn't even bring up the gas station or the park stunt in court. No, they argued that Ethan's autistic behavior was proof of abuse. They cited things like him screaming during thunderstorms or covering his ears in public as signs that I was damaging him. They even used a bite incident, one time, during a sensory overload at school, as evidence that I was encouraging violent outbursts. It didn't matter that Ethan adored me, that he ran into my arms every day when I came home, jumping and spinning like the world lit up when I entered, that I was the only one who could get him to sleep on rough days. None of that mattered. They twisted everything, pulled screenshots out of context, hired a bottom-of-the-barrel lawyer who bragged about getting creeps off with loopholes. The kind of guy who wore designer suits and a grin like he ate ethics for breakfast. Me? I had Ethan. And the truth, I knew the courtroom would overwhelm him, so I prepared him like I always did. We practiced with stuffed animals, watched court hearings online. I explained every detail, what custody meant, what cross-examination was, how to breathe when things felt too loud. I gave him tools, but most importantly, I gave him love. On trial day, they showed up looking smug. Rick winked at me like this was just a game. Their lawyer tore into me, called me unfit, said I was stunting Ethan's development, even claimed I'd hit him. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, I was terrified he'd shut down. Instead, he got mad. Clutching his navy blue notebook like a sword, he looked the judge in the eye and said, "That man is lying. Don't say things about my dad. He never hit me. He helps me. He tells me I'm not broken." The courtroom fell silent. He puts labels on my bookshelf. He doesn't let my peas touch my mashed potatoes. He helped me when Mom slapped me. He says thunder is just clouds arguing. Then he added, "I read Article 4 of the Kansas Family Code. It says the court is supposed to do what's best for me. What's best for me is staying with my dad." Rick's lawyer tried to object. The judge waved him off. "My dad makes me feel like I'm not different." They don't. When the judge ruled, full custody to me, no visitation rights for Lena's family, I cried for the first time since Lena left. Openly. Messily. Ethan just sat beside me and smiled like he already knew the ending. As Rick was escorted out, he shouted, "You think this ends here? You'll regret this." His mother added under her breath, "You don't know what you've started." And she was right. I didn't. Because 3 months later, Lena came back. And she wasn't alone. For a little while after the court ruling, I dared to believe we were safe. Ethan and I carved out something resembling normalcy. Our mornings began with his laminated routine checklist: brush teeth, weather report, breakfast, backpack check. Evenings were our favorite: science documentaries, quiet time under his weighted blanket, and bedtime stories about constellations. The house wasn't much, but it was quiet, and it was ours. For a boy with sensory sensitivities and a mind like a quantum processor, calm was everything. But peace never lasts when people like Rick and Lena's parents are waiting in the wings. It started slowly. Subtle. The red Dodge Ram I'd once prayed to never see again began appearing near Ethan's school. Then at the park. The comic shop. Never close enough to confront. Just parked. Lingering. Like a hunter gauging wind direction. I didn't want to alarm Ethan, so I said nothing. Big mistake. They're watching us again, he said one afternoon, standing silently by the window. What makes you say that? I asked, already knowing the answer. Same truck. Same sound. Dual exhaust. Rick's. He hadn't even turned his head. I put down the laundry and walked to him. You're right. But they can't hurt us, not here. He nodded and walked to his desk, pulled out a clean notebook, drew 4 red lines across the page and titled it, Confirmed Vehicle Sightings. He was building his own timeline. 3 weeks later, Lena reappeared. Not in person, on paper. A new custody petition, filed through a high-end family law firm in Denver. She wasn't coming back as a mother. She was coming back as a strategy. After 3 years of silence, no birthdays, no letters, not even a postcard, she wanted her rights back. The same woman who once told our son he was too much, now claimed she wanted a second chance. Her parents were funding the entire operation again. Lawyers, child behaviorists, independent evaluators. But this time, they had a plan. A deliberate, nasty plan. They weren't trying to prove I was unfit. They were trying to provoke Ethan into proving it for them. Rick began orchestrating public appearances. At the library, he accidentally bumped into us near the astronomy section. At the grocery store, he muttered something cruel about real boys not needing charts to eat food. Ethan froze, then erupted, loud, shaking, overwhelmed. The very next day, Lena's lawyer filed a motion citing emotional instability and escalating behavioral concerns under my care. They weren't documenting abuse. They were creating it. Worse still, I later discovered that Lena's parents had reached out, quietly and strategically, to Ethan's school. Not directly. They were smart. Through friends of friends, whispers, concerned tips. That maybe Ethan needed special oversight. That maybe his meltdowns were trauma responses. That maybe someone should flag that. I got called in by the principal. There's been chatter, she said cautiously. Some staff are concerned. He's been hiding under his desk during recess. Yes, I said, trying not to lose my temper. Because strange men are watching him through the fence. She frowned. You understand how that sounds. I understand exactly how that sounds. When I got home, Ethan was lining up his solar system models in orbital order. I sat beside him on the rug, my knees aching, and watched him work in silence. He didn't look up. How do I prove I'm safe when they're the ones making me scared? He asked. I had no answer. That night, I called Dr. Lynn. She'd been Ethan's therapist for years. Grounded, brilliant, always calm under fire. After hearing everything, she didn't panic. She just said, teach him to document. Don't burden him, but let him reclaim the story. So we did. Ethan started logging every incident. Date, time, location, trigger, reaction. He recorded how he felt before and after each encounter. Cross-referenced it with patterns. Even color-coded his emotions. It wasn't just evidence. It was armor. By the time the new court date arrived, he had 3 full notebooks. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before my alarm to find Ethan already dressed, sitting cross-legged on his bed under the glow of his moon lamp. He was flipping through his red notebook, the one he'd marked court-relevant facts. I organized them by importance, he said without looking up. Red stars mean critical. Blue triangles are context. You're amazing, I said, sitting beside him. He adjusted his blanket to balance the weight distribution. I also packed 7 books. If we have to wait. I swallowed a lump in my throat. No 10-year-old should be this familiar with court procedures. But this was the hand we'd been dealt. At the courthouse, Marcus, my attorney, met us in the lobby. He looked tired, his tie crooked, smelling faintly of strong coffee and stronger nerves. They're all here, he said grimly. Lena, her parents, Rick, and they brought witnesses, a teacher from her side, a so-called child development specialist, and a psychologist. A psychologist Ethan's never even met. I asked. They're saying his public meltdowns and social withdrawal indicate trauma under your care. They don't need to meet him. They're building a profile from his documented behavior. You mean the behavior they caused? I muttered. Marcus nodded. Exactly. But they're counting on the court seeing a distressed child, not the reasons why. Inside the courtroom, Lena wore a modest navy dress, her blonde hair styled in waves, trying to look maternal. Her parents flanked her like marble statues. Rick, arrogant as ever, winked when he saw us. Ethan's hand twitched in mine. Judge Ramirez entered, a serious woman with short silver hair and sharp eyes. She called the court to order. The sound of the gavel made Ethan flinch slightly, but he didn't look away. Lena's attorney approached the bench with a calm, calculated tone. My client regrets her earlier choices. She spent the last year rebuilding. She wants a relationship with her son, but the father has created an environment of isolation and emotional dependency that's clearly harming the child. I clenched my jaw. He suffers from social withdrawal, anxiety, delayed emotional maturity. He's regressed, evidenced by multiple school incidents and public outbursts. I wanted to scream. They'd taken everything Ethan struggled with, everything we worked to manage, and twisted it into ammunition. Ethan sat silently beside me, notebook open, fingers drumming in patterns of 5. I knew those taps. Anger, held in check. Next, Marcus stood. His voice was firm but calm. Your Honor, my client's son is autistic. Diagnosed at age 3. High functioning. His behaviors are not regression. They're consistent with the condition. We've managed them with structure, therapy, and compassion. He presented Dr. Lin's full psychological evaluation. Progress charts, therapy logs, incident breakdowns, each showing correlations between Rick's appearances and Ethan's reactions. Then came the surveillance photos. Rick's truck outside our house, outside the school, at the park, all time-stamped. This isn't maternal concern, Marcus said. This is harassment. The courtroom fell silent. Then Judge Ramirez turned to Ethan. Young man, she said softly, would you like to speak today? He closed his notebook, nodded, walked to the stand without hesitation. His shoes barely made a sound on the carpet. I brought notes, he said, so I don't forget. Take your time, she said. Ethan opened to a page marked with 2 red stars. And then he began. My mom left when I was 5 years, 2 months, and 15 days old. Ethan said clearly, standing at the witness stand like it was something he'd rehearsed every night in front of a mirror. She told me I was broken. Lena Wilson flinched visibly, her carefully manicured hands stiffening in her lap. Ethan flipped the page of his notebook with slow precision. She never called. Not on my birthdays. Not when I was sick. Not when I got 2nd place at the state science fair. Moms don't forget birthdays. He paused and glanced toward her. But I remember. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. My dad never said bad things about her, he continued. He just said she wasn't ready yet. That maybe one day, she would be. He flipped another page, this time exposing a hand-drawn map covered in lines, dots, and tiny notes. This is a map of where Uncle Rick's truck has been since the last hearing. 14 places. 6 of them near my school. 3 near the grocery store where Dad shops. Once, he was parked across from our house for over an hour. Lena's attorney abruptly stood. Objection. The child has clearly been. I don't get coached. Ethan interrupted without hesitation. I observe. I analyze. I record. That's how I make sense of the world. Judge Ramirez raised a hand to silence the attorney and gestured for Ethan to continue. I have one more thing, he said. Last Tuesday, Rick came to our house. He didn't knock. He didn't think anyone was home. I had a stomach ache, so Dad let me stay in bed. He pulled a small digital voice recorder from his pocket, one of the ones his therapist, Dr. Lin, recommended for processing thoughts when writing felt overwhelming. I recorded what he said on the phone outside our back door. He said, once we get the kid, we'll make sure he never sees his dad again. Lena just needs to play her part for a few more days. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs. My stomach dropped. I hadn't known about any of it. Judge Ramirez requested the recorder and listened through headphones in silence. When she took them off, her expression was grave. This court is in recess, she announced. Counsel, meet me in my chambers immediately. Ethan walked back to our table slowly, his face pale and drawn. I pulled him into a side hug, gentle, careful not to overstimulate. You didn't tell me, I whispered. I had to be sure, he said softly. Dr. Lin says sometimes you have to observe before you intervene. That line hit me in a way I didn't expect. It took me back to when I was 10, Ethan's age now, and walked in on my father silently crying in the garage the day after he lost his job. I stood in the doorway, watching him hold a broken belt from the lawnmower and staring at it like it had betrayed him. That night, he made us instant noodles for dinner and told me everything would be fine. I didn't believe him, but I remembered the way he pulled himself back together like a man folding paper into a new shape. That quiet resilience? I saw it in Ethan now. When the hearing resumed, Lena was gone. Her absence filled the room louder than her presence ever could. Judge Ramirez's tone was sharp. Due to the evidence presented and the recording submitted by the minor, I am issuing an immediate and expanded restraining order against Rick Hale. Furthermore, I am pausing all custody motions pending a full investigation into Mr. Hale's behavior. She looked at me and softened slightly. You and your son are free to go. For now. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exhale. As we packed our things, I kept watching the door, half expecting Lena to storm back in with some kind of excuse. But instead, she met us outside in the parking lot. She approached quickly. Please, she called out. Just 1 minute. Patrick stepped forward, but I waved him back. Ethan stood stiffly at my side, clutching his notebook against his chest like a shield. I didn't know what Rick was planning, she said. They told me you were poisoning him against me, that you wouldn't let me see him. You left, I reminded her. You called him broken and walked away. I know, she whispered. I was young and terrified, but they manipulated me. They promised to help me fix it if I just filed for custody. Did you ever try to reach out before the courts? I asked. She hesitated, didn't answer, which was all the answer I needed. I'm not here to fight anymore, she added. I want to drop the case and apologize. Her eyes moved to Ethan. To both of you. Ethan tilted his head. Are you still scared of me? No, she said quietly. I was scared of failing you. He considered that, then nodded once. Okay, apology accepted, but only if you stop letting people like Rick tell you what to do. I will, she promised. Good, he said. Now I want to go home. That night, as I tucked him into bed, Ethan pulled his notebook out again. What are you writing? I asked. He tapped the page. A hypothesis. If we stay smart and stay together, we stay safe. I smiled. That's not a hypothesis, buddy. That's a strategy. He leaned back on his pillow and closed his eyes. And for the first time since Lena returned, he didn't ask if we were going to have to move again. But I already knew the answer. We left just after dawn, 2 days after Lena withdrew her petition. It wasn't triumphant. There were no goodbyes, no final glances back. Just a quiet exit. Intentional. Calculated. Ethan didn't ask why. He knew. He always knew. Instead, he opened his notebook and made a checklist titled Operation Relocation. Telescope, blue notebook, 14 favorite books, bookshelf labels, science fair medals, solar system model. He labeled one of the boxes. Evidence. Do not throw away. I told him we were changing our last name to Walker. He paused his labeling and looked up. Like, because we're always walking away? Not away, I said. Forward. He studied me for a beat, then nodded. That made sense to him. We drove in silence, the city shrinking in the rearview mirror, the early morning light casting long shadows across familiar streets we'd never see again. Ethan kept a log of every license plate we passed. Arkansas, Nebraska, Utah. That one's got a cracked tail light. We stopped only once, at a nondescript gray building on the edge of town. I told Ethan I had to pick up some special travel documents. He stayed in the car, flipping through the ultimate space encyclopedia, the gift MS. Eden had given him on our last visit to the library. Inside, Diane, ex-detective turned private security consultant, waited behind a desk stacked with sealed folders. She handed me an envelope. New IDs, SSNs, bank accounts, she said. Your employment history checks out under the new identity. School records have been scrubbed and reassigned. She tapped a second envelope. Digital monitoring set. Any pings on your old name, credit checks, medical files, background pulls, you'll know before they do. I nodded, my throat tight. This was more than an identity change. It was an escape hatch. Back in the car, Ethan asked, Did you get the documents? All set. Good. He added a check mark to his notebook under the heading, Critical tasks, executed. We arrived in our new city after dark. Not too small, not too big. Anonymous. I'd rented a furnished apartment with a rooftop deck. When Ethan saw it, his eyes widened. For stargazing, he asked. Every night. He stood in the doorway of his new room, scanning the bookshelves. Acceptable, he said, but we'll need proper labels. That first night, every sound jolted me awake. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the old radiator, a siren in the distance. I kept checking the window, half expecting Rick's red pickup or Lena's father's sedan. But the street stayed quiet. The next morning, I enrolled Ethan in school. The local district had a well-regarded program for neurodiverse students. I started working remotely as a technical writer, flexible hours, reliable income. We found a therapist, Dr. Ramirez, who specialized in trauma and autism. She didn't flinch when Ethan corrected her on the pronunciation of series. He adapted faster than I did. He mapped the neighborhood in his notebook, noise levels, peak traffic hours, optimal routes to the park and library. He made a friend, Zoe, a quiet girl with a fascination for lunar geology and a tolerance for Ethan's insistence on precision. She says I talk like a professor, he said one evening, pleased. She says it's cool. It is cool, I told him. You're cool. He rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. 3 months in, Diane's first alert came through. Rick had started asking around, former coworkers, school contacts. But the trail went cold. A month later, Lena's parents hired a private investigator. Same result. They're looking, Diane warned, but your firewall's solid. It didn't comfort me. It pressured me. One mistake, a tagged photo, an old document left behind, and they'd find us. 6 months later, we bought a small house. Nothing special. Peeling paint. Outdated kitchen. A leaky faucet that groaned like an old man at night. But it had what Ethan wanted most, a rooftop deck. We set up the telescope the first night. Sitting up there under a clear sky, Ethan adjusted the eyepiece and said, I think our hypothesis was correct. Which one? That we'd be okay if we stuck together. He scribbled something in his notebook. I watched him, lit only by starlight. His hand was steady, his breath calm. A year in, Patrick emailed me. Rick Hale, arrested. Wire fraud. Facing 10 years. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. I didn't tell Ethan. There was no reason to. 2 years after we fled, Patrick forwarded a package, a letter from Lena. No threats. No demands. Just remorse. She said she'd been in therapy. That she'd cut ties with her parents and Rick. That she finally saw what had been done to Ethan, what she'd allowed. Enclosed was a small box with a certified meteorite fragment. I remembered he liked space, she wrote. Maybe he'll want this someday. I gave it to Ethan. He examined the rock, silent. It's a chondrite, he said finally. Probably from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Billions of years old. What do you want to do with it? I'll keep it, but I don't want to write back. That's okay, I said. You don't owe her anything. Maybe one day, he said. When I'm ready. Or when I have questions about space rocks. 3 years after we disappeared into our new lives, an email arrived from Patrick. It was brief, clinical, almost like he was afraid to say too much. Alan Keene passed. Heart attack. Evelyn relocated to a retirement community in Florida. Rick's still incarcerated. Lena's working as a teacher's aide in Indiana. No recent attempts to locate you. That was it. No veiled threats. No legal inquiries. No new court motions. Just silence. That night, I found Ethan on our rooftop deck, telescope aimed at the stars. The cool night air had that sharp, clean bite that only comes in early spring. His latest blue notebook, version 4 by now, was open beside him, filled with orbital charts, constellations, and his ever-meticulous observations. Dad, he said quietly, still peering into the eyepiece. I can't remember what our old house looked like anymore. I sat down next to him. That's normal, I said gently. Memories fade. I don't want it to fade. His tone sharpened. It mattered. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I pulled my wallet from my back pocket, unfolded a creased piece of paper, and handed it to him. It was the drawing he made the day we left. Our old house, drawn in thick black marker, with 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing beneath a yellow sun. Underneath, in his careful first-grade handwriting, our first home, where Dad taught me I'm not broken. His eyes widened. You kept this? Of course I did, I said. Some things are worth remembering. He traced the figures with his fingertips. Can we frame it? Absolutely. He tucked it carefully into the back of his notebook, then turned back to the telescope. I'm glad we moved here. So am I. Even with everything we had to leave behind. The names, the house, the few friends who'd stood by us. Even with the constant fear in those first months, the strange city, the new routines. It had been worth it. It was scary, he said, but it was the right call. That was when I realized. He wasn't just repeating what I told him. He believed it. Later, as I tucked him into bed, something he now claimed to be too old for, but still allowed on certain nights, he whispered, "Dad, do you think we'll ever have to run again?" I shook my head. I don't think so, buddy. We're safe now. This is our home. Good, he said, snuggling into his pillow. Because I like it here. I like being a walker. Me too. As I reached for the light switch, he added softly, "Thanks for not giving up. For fighting for us." My throat tightened. Always, kiddo. Always. 5 years later, we celebrated with a trip to a dark sky preserve, far from city lights and distractions. Just us, a telescope, a fire, and a sky full of stars. Ethan, now 10, set up his scope with the kind of efficiency that came from hundreds of nights spent stargazing. His blue notebook was now a binder, organized by constellation. As we sat by the fire, warm light flickering across our faces, he asked, "Do you ever miss our old life?" I took a moment. "I miss pieces of it," I said. "Some people, some places, but I don't miss the fear." He nodded. I didn't even know how scared I was until I wasn't anymore. "And how do you feel now?" He looked up at the sky. "Safe," he said, "and not broken." I wrapped my arm around his shoulders. This time, he didn't pull away. That was all I'd ever wanted. The past was behind us. For good. We'd outlasted it. Outgrown it. And looking up at that night sky, vast and untouched, I knew one thing for certain. We hadn't just escaped. We had finally, truly begun.